Again, so we are going to be going through the BC Peace Agri-Weather Network. And we have contracted Andy Nadler with Peak Hydromet Solutions, who's been working with us for the last couple of years just to iron out some tweaks and just help us getting this running smoothly. Okay, so the network originally started in 2014. It was originally administered by the BC Grain Producers Association, but they were setting up, or it was brought up that there was a gap in agriculturally relevant weather data and the accessible to that. So there was a core group of peace producers from all the different cross commodity associations in the region, and so that we actually worked with Andy at that time. And we developed a report. It was then decided that we actually wanted to build a network. So in 2015 and 2016, we actually created a network in conjunction with Weather Innovation Consulting. So there were stations set up across the Peace region, and that was set up. In 2017, when our association took over administering this, we actually moved just because WIN is based out of Ontario and they only came and did maintenance once a year and so on. We decided to actually move the platform to a kind of our own standalone website. And we actually trained our own local maintenance contractor to be able to do more timely repairs and diagnosis when needed. Still had some glitches though at that time. So in 2020, we contracted Andy to basically help us get everything running smoothly. And that's where we are at today. This is since the inception of the network. There have been several different groups that have contributed to it. So you'll see there the commodity associations that have all partnered and put money in at some point. We've also had several different funding contributors to it between our regional and regional, provincial, and national government projects, and then a local, the BC Hydro Fund. So just as this is kind of a written overview that Andy will go through, but basically the current and historical information is available on the website for any person or industry wanting or needing access to rural Peace region weather. There are no subscription fees or complicated accounts preventing access. We have 20 stations set up in several rural communities throughout both the North and South Peace region. Users have access to historical data which may be needed for a variety of situations, such as claims to crop insurance, litigation issues with other industries, or to assist researchers and government when developing models or trends. The Regional District Emergency Management Team also can access the information to assist in drought and flood risks, and city residents can use information to inform potential weather disasters. There are several different weather tools and models on the website to assist farmers in making a season management decision. The tools include a Fusarium head blight model, which is a disease in wheat midge model, which is an economic pest in wheat, and growing degree days indicating when a crop will reach maturity. And then Andy's also created a series of tutorial videos on how to use the functions that can be found, and that can be found under the user guide on the site. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy now so that he can show you the website.
All right, thanks, Talon. Just thought, to start out with, we talk about the weather stations and stuff like that. Well, what's weather station look like? Here's an example of one. So they're pretty straightforward. They collect everything that's around them: wind speed, direction, rainfall, temperature, relative humidity. So the basic weather parameters. Each one of these is wireless, so they transmit the data. We get it about every 10 minutes and present it. So basically what I'm going to show you is the website part of it. I think a lot of this should be intuitive, like any decent website, as long as, the user should be able to walk through it pretty easily without needing a lot of guidance. But at the same time, I think walking through it is useful just to be able to point out any new features, anything that maybe you didn't know about or needs a little bit more explanation. So so I'm going to do that. I'm just going to walk through feature by feature. If there are any questions, I would say, since it's not a big group, let's feel free to put your hand up or put them in the chat, and maybe we can address them as we go. So like I say, I'm going to walk through the website itself. One of the things, and Talon mentioned this a second ago, there are some how-to videos added too. So if you go to the user guide for any of this, there is information about each feature. And with some of them, there are links to YouTube videos that show a little bit more information. They're short, they're about 2.5 minutes each. So, and you can even play them at 1.5 time if you want. So speed them up even more. But so that'll give you a little bit more information, and frankly, it'll be some of the things that I'm going to talk about here today. So, so there is definitely some information to look for here. Now let's see. I guess just to start out with, if you haven't been to the site before, this is kind of what it would look like. You'll notice on the left side, there's just a list of stations here. On the right side, there's the map. So we're going to start out with the map here. And this shows pretty much as real time of information as you'll get. As I mentioned, it's updated about every 10 minutes. So this is going to show you current conditions. So each of these is a weather station, and each of these little icons here is dynamic. So in this case, we're looking at temperature, current temperature. You can click on any of the stations and it'll tell you the current value. So here at Buick, minus 8.2. The feels like rain today. Well, there's no rain. Also shows the updated time. So in this case, 7:45. This would be my time zone. I'm in Pacific. So it's about I guess 20 minutes ago. So it's fairly recent in terms of what you're seeing. Now you can also toggle other parameters, so wind speed. So you can see the current wind speeds here. You'll notice some blanks. In most cases, that just means it's calm. Sometimes this time of year, there could be some issues with the anemometers, just given that we're coming out of winter, and there's a little bit of maintenance to do in spring. But you can look at current wind speed, and again, precipitation. Well, it doesn't mean much today because it's not raining. But during the growing season, this is definitely nice because you can see sort of an overview, a spatial overview of what's going on across the region. If you want, you can you can look at it full screen, and then once again, if you want to drill down into a station, you can do that. So that's really your map there. Now the left-hand side here, as I mentioned, if you've never logged in or if you've never been on the site before, you'd have a blank list here. Now, if you have some particular stations that are of interest to you, say they're near your farm, you would add them to what are called the favorites up top. Favorites, bookmarks. We don't actually have a real name for them. But with the station here, all you have to do is hit select. And what happened is when I hit Dawson Creek, it bumps the card up to the top here. So this gives you sort of a pinned view of that station. So if you have a few other stations that are sort of your favorites, I don't know, let's just put them up there. And you can do as many as you want. You can have all the stations up there as you want if you want to. But normally, if you farm in an area, you'll have the nearby area locations that you're going to look at. So again, it shows some of the similar information in terms of for your station. It shows your temperature, your rainfall. Also has your humidity, has your high and your low temperatures for the day. So this morning, since midnight, what's been the max min, as well as the wind speed and the time of updated. So that gives you sort of your more in-depth information about a station. Now, so far, we've really looked at what's happening right now. So kind of the current conditions. If you want to look at, well, I guess there's two other sides to it. One of them is we look back in time. The other one is the forecast side. Everybody wants to know what's going to happen with the weather. There are other forecasts out there. This is one that does get used. So if I just click on any of these stations up top, and like I say, I can add more of them. But for instance, for Dawson Creek, if I just click on this box here, it's going to bring me to a forecast page. Now, this isn't a great example because what it normally shows, and let's just go to a different, a bit of a time issue here. Yeah. Okay, well, here's actually a pretty not a bad example. Sorry, I'm looking for a. Okay, well, here's one that's okay. So what it normally has, and it depends on the time, because basically the way it works in time is you have your historical data up until now, then you have your forecast data going out into the future. Now, there's always going to be this sort of this handoff in terms of this is what's happened and this is what's going to happen. Now, the forecast, of course, as everyone knows, isn't perfect. There's going to be, even where the station is, timing, there's going to be a little bit of an offset. They're not going to be exact. So what you see here actually is an example of this. Here, there is a bit of an overlap. So the red temperature values here, this shows what's been recorded from the station. These are hourly values. So you can see the minus 8.1, minus 8. It's warming up to about minus 6.9. But then this gray line here is the forecast temperature. So this goes, and it's a little bit behind here as well. So you see that minus 8.6, minus 9.8, 9.7. So you actually do see a little bit of a, let's see, 6.9. So there's about a 3-degree discrepancy between what the forecast is saying and what the station has been reported. That's not abnormal. In a perfect world, you'd actually have it where you have that perfect handoff where your forecast is basically from now on it's going to be seamless, but you will see this type of gap now and then. So here's your temperature values. You can see this diurnal fluctuation. Your high is going to be around plus 0.1, and then going out. In this case, it's showing 48 hours, so you can see the hourly. Now, beyond temperature, if you go to below, you can also see your other parameters. So again, going out 48 hours, hourly increments, you can see your temperature, your humidity, probability of precipitation. So if we go down, yeah, it looks like it's starting about 6 o'clock, light snow, 35%, then it ups to, it doesn't go much beyond 50%. So there's about a 50% chance of light snow, around later this evening. And then it's back to 0. So you can look at that for probability of precipitation as well as your wind speed, wind direction. So something like wind speed, wind direction, say for spraying decisions, obviously not right now, but you can look ahead and see that, okay, well, my wind speeds forecast, they're all really, I don't see anything above, 4.8 kilometers per hour is maybe the highest value that I'm seeing. So, potentially if it was a, spraying weather with crops and stuff like that, you could look at that and use it to advise on, whether the wind speed is appropriate for spraying or not. So definitely handy in that way with the forecast. The other thing you can do, as I did earlier, is you can also scroll between different stations this way without going back to the home screen and then clicking on that. So there's kind of a quick way of going between stations here. So with the forecast, so I guess the other thing I didn't mention, there's some of the data up top here too, sunrise, sunset, and those are just based on the location and the time of year. I'm going to jump over to historical data here. So this is where you can get everything that has happened. So for instance, if you want to look at, well, you can look at yesterday, last week, daily and hourly. So let's just look at daily for a second here. So it has a start and a end date range. So if we want to go say, let's look at the 2021 season. Here's just a quick way to jump across. Say if we go from May 15th to, let's go till September 1st. So I've selected the date range. Okay. Then there's a couple of ways to look at it. If you want just a really quick visual, you can go to the chart. So this shows you the time series. On the top, it's temperature, relative humidity, and rainfall. So as you can see, the bars here are the rainfall. You can right away see probably the highest one-day rainfall here is, let's see, well, it's an inch, 25.4 millimeters. Then you have the rainfall throughout, average temperature, average RH, as well as your wind speed throughout. So the green is the actual speed, and the red dots here is wind gust. Another piece I'd like to point out here, and this is, I find this to be really handy, is, you can look at the chart, it gives you a little bit of information, but this summary is kind of nice. So for instance, if your growing season, if you planted your crop, say May 15th and harvested September 1st or whatever this date range you want to set, this summary is kind of interesting because first of all, it gives you kind of your number of days. So it's 109 days from planting to harvest. Average temperature during that period, that tells you a little bit. Lowest temperature, that's an interesting one. So you know that between that period, well, I did actually have a freezing event, at least one freezing event. I can see that my highest recorded temperature was 38.7. Now, this is interesting too. You can see the rainfall across here. Well, the total for this period is 105 mils. But where it gets interesting is the normal rainfall for this period. So 30 years averages per year for that period, that May 15th to September 1st, is 242 millimeters. So if we look at that in comparison to normal, that's a 43% of normal rainfall. So that's extremely low. That's less than half of what would be received normally. So this is a nice feature just in terms of, especially if you don't know an area. Obviously, anybody who lives in the area does know, and they know it's dry. But this really puts it into perspective, and it puts a number on, 104 doesn't sound bad. But when you look at it as, well, that's 43% of what's normal, that really does provide some context to the data. Now, the other way to look at it is with the tabular form. Now, I mentioned, we have the lowest temperature of 0.4 degrees Celsius. One trick I use is if I really want to quickly find out, well, when did that happen? These columns are sortable. So by default, it should be sorted by date. Here it's date descending. So, here's date ascending from May 15th on. But I can also sort by other parameters. So in this case, I just sorted by minimum temperature. And I can see right now that June 8th was that low temperature of minus 0.4. And that was the only freezing temperature recorded. There's a couple of close calls here. May 19th was 0.6, May 20th was 0.7. Then from there, we're more into the safer zone of the, the twos, the threes, that type of thing. So really nice feature there, just in terms of being able to look at, very quickly determine, okay, what were my cold, what were my highs? I can look at, my coldest maximum temperature was 9.3 in May. Then my hot temperatures, quite a few hot temperatures through June. Looks like June, 27th to the 30th. All of the daytime highs were, into the 30s. So I think we all remember that was pretty hot times there. And then as well, something like rain, we can also see. I mentioned that high rainfall event. 25.4 is not huge. It's an inch of rain, but again, you can identify any of the extremes really. So kind of a nice way to do that. The other piece of information is, say, if I want to look at, well, actually, before I get there, I'll just say, if you have this information, you want to do some more analysis, comparisons, charts, whatever, just do the export to Excel. You can save it. And instantly it's there we go, it's in Excel, so you can do whatever else you want with it. So really quick and easy that way. So nice feature there. The other one I wanted to say was the hourly data. So in this case, well, I guess I could also say you can do any station, but if I also want to drill down a little bit more to hourly data. Now, one of the limitations with hourly is it's not going to give you 109 days of hourly values. That's going to be too much. It's probably going to take a little while, and it's going to be more information that you need. There is a 2-day maximum there, and that's reflected in the calendar. So again, if I wanted to do, say 20 March, let's do whatever, July 1st, 2nd or something. I can either do a chart. So that shows your hourly values now instead of the daily. Shows that it did rain there, 0.25 mils during that period. I can do the table. So once again, it is sortable. So I can, if I want to see what max, min, rainfall, whatever it was, or just sort by date default, easy to do. And I can also export to Excel. So pretty easy to use there. Now, I'm going to jump over to growing degree days. Now, this feature has been added to quite a lot in the last several months. Now, most people are probably familiar with the growing degree day. It's really it's a way to measure heat. Now, something like average temperature doesn't tell you a lot because, first of all, it really ignores extremes. But if you're looking over a whole growing season, an average, it really doesn't tell you much because, you know, you could have warm days, you could have cool days. It's really not what the plant responds to. So growing degree days are really common, you know, a common and time-tested way of gauging growth and development of crops. It's been around forever, and it works pretty good. It's, you know, it's not perfect, but it does work reasonably well, and it's based on air temperature. So if you have a weather station with air temperature, you can calculate growing degree days. Now, most organisms, so I guess every organism has a base temperature that they normally use. Now, for straight growing degree days, this one's configurable. If you know that your base temperature for whatever insect or crop is, say, 2 degrees Celsius, you can set that yourself. You can also set, so we'll go May through October 2021. You can set that base temperature and instantly calculate your growing degree days. So here's a base 2. Well, let's go with a more standard, something like base 0. And then you can see throughout that period, so May 15th, 2021 till the end, this is your accumulation. So you can see the line graph here, the dots with the line through it, that's your actual accumulation. So if you look at the end, you're at 2027. But it also shows you the daily accumulation. So here, just in a really quick snapshot, you can see, and we looked at that in the historical data, you can really see those hot temperatures in that late June period. Really stands out over the rest of the season, which is interesting because June is not typically that way. You know, you compare with the hot months of July and early August, June is really a lot hotter than those ones. And then you actually have quite a cooler snap in this mid-July, probably from about the 15th to probably the 27th or so. So really interesting just to see the seasonal dynamics. You know, we could even we could compare with other seasons, and we'd probably see more of a typical summer pattern. But anyway, I'm just going to show, well, first of all, the growing degree days. This also shows, similar to the historical with the summary, it shows a little bit of information, including this normal information, the percent of normal. So in this case, the date range I've selected, we have the number of days, 140 days. And then it's broken down into just kind of the standard GDD threshold, 0, 5, and 10 Celsius. So in this case, we have the actual accumulations. So the higher the base temperature, the lower the accumulation. But then we also have the normals for those periods. So given those same dates at that location. And then you can see the percent of normal. So unlike precipitation, which was like 43, here we see that the actual percent of normal is well above. And for heat, this is really high in terms of 112%, 118%, 132%. So 2021 was definitely, as we know, it was a hot season, and it really shows. And you combine that with less than 50% of average rainfall, that's a hot and dry season. So again, no surprises there. Now, you can also see the historical or the tabular data below. So it's really just what you're looking at the chart. Now, what has been added here is some crop growth stages. So we've added canola, wheat, and barley to the crops for growth stages. So if I want to say I seeded my canola May 15th, doesn't really matter what the end date is. It's going to be a little earlier than that. So maybe let's put the end date to, I don't know. Let's go October 30th, May. Let's go May 15th to October 31st. And in this case, I could calculate growing degree days, but if I want to do canola, it adds a few features. First of all, in this case, there's canola generally uses a 5-degree base threshold, but what gets added here is some stages along the way. So the actual table is pretty close. But you can see here, and these are based on growing degree days. They're not going to be perfect, but they're kind of a ballpark. Based on that seeding date, emergence, and you have the pop-ups here. So from in this case, emergence is around June 1. So we're about a 15-day planting to emergence. We look at the next stage, 4 leaves unfold. This is occurring around June 21. And then so on with, in this case, we could say that first flower opens around here's July 5th. We can look at our duration of flowering. Of course, that's going to change due to it's not just temperature. There's nutrient, fertility, things like that, moisture content, but it is based on some of the research in terms of the development. So you can basically see, well, in this case, and anyone who planted their canola on May 15th can tell me if I'm wrong. In this case, it was predicting a flowering ends around that August 23rd. So it basically goes through the growth cycles. Different, we can also do, say, wheat, same thing. If it's planted that same date, we can see that, well, flag leaf is maybe, in this case, June 26, soft dough, August 13th, and so on. So basically, you can look at it and pretty quickly get an indication of your crop growth stages. Where this is nice, obviously here we're looking at last year. It's already happened, but if we're looking at the current year, you can see approximately where you're at, how far you are from the next. There isn't a forecast component in here, so it's if I was looking at this today or sometime during the middle of the growing season, it's not going to project out to the end of the growing season, but at least it'll give you approximately where you're at, and you can see sort of if you're close to the next stages, that type of thing. So there is the growing degree days. Now, the other two features, right now, there's really not a lot to see, particularly for Fusarium. This is a dynamic model in the sense where it turns on during the growing season. So there's you can't look at last year or anything. It's just, it gives the current risk. So as you can see, it's telling you to go away. There's no risk right now. Come back in. Well, it says May to September, but realistically, it'd be during that early flowering risk period. So this would show whether the risk of Fusarium is low, medium, high, extreme, and that's based on mainly the temperature and moisture at the weather station. So again, it's of course, with any of these models, you still have to scout, look at your crop, that type of thing, but it shows you what the estimated risk is based on the models. Wheat midge we can look at. So in this case, well, we have 2022 here. It's already running, but let's look back at, say, 2021. If I do get results, wheat midge, the emergence of wheat midge is based on growing degree days. So similar to the GDD. I think it uses a base 10, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's a base 0. I shouldn't have said it. But in this case, basically, it starts from the very beginning of the season. So I showed you 2022. 2022, it's already started. I don't think there's been any accumulation, but it starts basically doesn't rely on seeding or anything because it's an insect that just overwinters. So in this case, it shows the previous days, but in this case, this line shows the actual accumulation during the growing season. When it hits a critical threshold, it triggers approximately the 10% emergence, then to the 50%, and then to the 90%. So in terms of treatment, depending on your, in your product, stuff like that, you would look for that early emergence to be able to target the insect at the right time. So this is, again, based on growing degree days, much better than using calendar date because, as we saw a year like last year with different heat, things do shift. So this does use your temperature. It's really uses better information for to actually do the prediction of the emergence. In this case too, the female emergence estimated. So here it shows the actual, that 10%, in this case, the 40%, the 90%, or sorry, 10, 50, and 90% based on the days. So it's in a 10, it's a weekday or a weekly blocks here, but it still gives you that ballpark. The last thing I wanted to cover, and this is, I don't know, there's some people that use it, probably most people don't, because you don't really need to use it. If you notice, if you haven't logged in, there's a user settings. If you log out, it'll show you log in or password. Actually, let's just do that. Oops, I think I logged out. It didn't log me out. That's okay. Well, you've seen a login before. So if you go to the user settings, there's really there's not a lot of additional functionality. The only one that is there that is kind of nice is obviously change password, log out. Those are just there. But for alerts, so these are custom alerts that you can set. So in this case, you put in your email address, and an alert is a threshold-based notification. So if you say that I want to receive an email when temperature gets close to freezing, I could just do temperature gets below, say I want 1 degree Celsius, and then I would turn on that notification. I want that notification, maybe hourly, maybe daily. The one thing I have some notifications turned on is with the daily, if it's below, it comes the same time every day, which is maybe not as good. So you may want to do the hourly, but you'd have to play around with it because nobody wants to get an hourly email all throughout if it's repetitive or if it's the same event, say it's well below zero, but depending on what you're looking for. So same thing, if you want to know if the wind, say the wind speed gets above, if you're spraying or something, I want to know if it's above, say 10 kilometers an hour, I can turn on that notification, I can save changes, and then I would get the email. So just another way to sort of get that push notification out as opposed to having to go check on the information. But of course, you can look at this information anytime. Another thing to mention, I've done this all on the screen because I'm sitting in front of it, but this all does work on mobile. I think when we look at the stats for the analytics, it seems like more than half the users are actually using it on mobile. So that's good to know, good information, just knowing that a lot more people are probably using it on the go, whether it be in the field, that type of thing. So you can do all this on mobile as well. So I think with that, I've gone through most of the features here. There's probably a few little things that I've missed, but I guess I would open up to questions, or if Foster or Talon have anything to add, now would be the time.
What has the use data that you guys collected been like? Has there been good uptake of the use of the website?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the numbers. I can say, yeah, it's been good, but what does that mean? It's not 10 million hits, but it's in terms of the numbers in the region, I was actually looking at it. I was pretty impressed just in terms of, in terms of even just the number of producers and stuff like that, the number of hits throughout the season. So yeah, it seemed pretty good from what I could see.
And was the use smaller during like the growing season?
Yeah.
Like around spraying and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a kind of a lull because, well, first of all, in January, nobody wants to know if it's, minus 28 or minus 30. And yeah, there's just less going on for sure. So it's there's definitely a seasonal pattern.
And how accurate are the growing degree day calculations? Like I think Keith did a pest monitoring update a couple weeks ago, and like our farm was in Tower Lake, and there was comparison to Prescott, and we had relatively the same growing degree days. Is that just based on that particular year, or I'm just wondering about the accuracy?
Yeah, well, it's accuracy is kind of a loaded term because the actual numbers they're based on what the weather stations measure. The weather stations are accurate if you have stations in different areas, depending on how different those microclimates are, there's going to be some variation. Where the accuracy sort of, I wouldn't say it falls off, but the big variable is how it actually relates to what's going on. So if it's for insects or for crops, the problem, or I guess the complicating factor, is that there's more things or more variables in there. So for instance, with insects, or even, well, with crops too, you think of, say, the time between planting and emergence. If you're planting shallow, if you're planting deep, if your seed bed is warmer, if it's wet, if it's dry, that's going to influence your emergence, over those 2 weeks or whatever. And that could be by days. So there's always going to be other factors, like I mentioned with crop development. Fertility is a factor, moisture stress, some of these, if the crop's stressed, usually it's going to go reproductive faster, those types of things. Those are not accounted for at all in growing degree days. So that's where you are going to get some of that margin of error. And same with insects. Like insects are tougher because they tend to, they tend to react to their environment a little bit more. So there's definitely some potential, some potential margin of error in that. And that's why even in the interface, it's a little bit vague, because it's kind of like, all right, they should be out there, but you should still go scout. They're, it's sort of a bit more of a guide as opposed to, yes, they're out there because the GDD says so. So it's, there's definitely a few things to consider there.
Yeah, thank you.
Andy, I was just gonna add to your answer around use and mention that the Google Analytics, you just introduced that not much more than a year ago. So
it was about September of last year. Yeah.
Okay. So it was just sort of, yeah. So right. It was just, we only have just over a year sort of comparison back to a previous year. So hopefully this year will be really interesting to see how it compares to last year as a measure, as a benchmark. And there are, I think, Andy, you do have the sort of the more precise numbers somewhere, but I think it's the relative use that we are particularly interested in seeing.
Yeah.
Any other questions? You're welcome to type them into the chat and I can read them out. No other questions out there. We've got a few minutes set aside for questions, so please please pipe up if there's anything on your mind, or even any suggestions, I suppose, for the system if you've used it.
I guess the one other thing that I sort of mentioned earlier, when we look at even just some limitations to keep in mind with the network. These are the weather stations themselves, as I showed. They measure rainfall. So if you look in here, not the best picture here, but this contraption here, this black one, this collects the rain. So it's really a funnel that funnels the rain into it's called a tipping bucket that tips when rain comes in. As soon as you get freezing temperatures and snow, this does not function. So you could get 3 feet of snow and this thing's just going to freeze up. It'll stop working. When it thaws, some of that snow, if it stays in the gauge, is going to register. Depending on where it is, that might be 3 months later. So a lot of it might have blown away or sublimated, that type of thing. So that's one thing to keep in mind is in the winter time. Don't pay attention to the precipitation. Well, it does say rain, which is intentional because it is rain that it's measuring. It's not necessarily precipitation. So, and that was, you can measure snowfall, but it actually, the sensors that are used are, they're probably about twice the cost of the actual weather station. So just from a practicality point of view, it's not worth it because we're, most farmers are concerned with rainfall during the season. So just a point to mention.
And we did just dig up the numbers for users. So for 2021, there were 798 users and 2,618 page views. So that's, I suppose, what we'll be looking between May and September. So we'll be looking to see this year what those look like.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I think it was about 60% were from tablets and smartphones. So there's a lot more people viewing it on phone or iPad.
One thing to note about it is just because there's not a lot of content on the site, it's really hard to find when you Google it. So just typing in the actual, what Andy has, that bcpeaceweather.com will bring you right to the website. But we've talked to the website person, and he said that, yeah, there's not a lot that they can do just because we don't have a ton of content on the actual website. It can be found when you Google it. You can get to it through even our website developers page, but it doesn't pop up immediately, which is unfortunate, but there's apparently not much we can do about that.
Yeah, we're a bit surprised at that because Talon, you'd mentioned that. I tried, just Googling, BC Peace weather, and it there's a lot of other things that come up and links to it from climate, different sites and stuff, but not directly. So that's something we'll have to look at just with search engine optimization and stuff. So.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, Talon and Andy, I don't know if you have any other sort of last words or additional information about the network to share.
Nope.
If go ahead. Oh,
I was just gonna say, I guess, yeah, if there's suggestions, comments, that type of thing, then fire them over to Talon or myself. But yeah, for sure, it's always good to get some feedback and ideas.
All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Great, thanks everyone, and have a great day. And we'll be sharing around the recording of this with all of you who registered, including those who didn't attend today. So if you're watching it later, thanks. Okay, have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.